You know that I'm dying a little bit inside right now? Just a tiny little bit?
What's different from normal?
Oh, fair. You mean hoarding or dying? Okay.
Oh, okay, both. But I see, I see.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it's that kind of episode.
Welcome to the What's Your Baseline podcast, where we demystify enterprise architecture and business process management.
We're here to bring best practices and lessons learned from our years to your ears, as well as interviewing friends we met along the way on our professional journeys.
My name is Roland, and I'm joined today by my co-host, James Robinson.
In a stunning reversal, hey, Roland, how you doing today?
I am completely overwhelmed, you know. This is such a strange experience, you know. I'm not allowed to greet our audience with my usual question. Hey JM, how you
Mhm.
doing?
Welcome to this episode where you are the guest. I know we've done this once before, folks, but it was a similar and equally good reason back then. Welcome to another hot seat for Roland on his brand new book. Coming
Yeah.
out soon if you're listening to the episode right on time. But if you're not, I believe it just dropped for you on September 15th. Is that right? Hey, there we go.
It will. It will. So first of all, while you're asking, thanks for asking. First of all, this episode will be released and you're listening to it on my birthday. So that is nice. You know, I hope you enjoy it, my virtual birthday cake. The other thing is, I had hoped that I could release my second book um, also on that date, but I guess I need a week more, you know, to get everything
Mm.
buttoned up and whatnot. So, but the 15th sounds also good, and I'm on time.
So
Uh,
you're saying the best birthday present for anyone is on your birthday is to buy your book.
yeah,
I
you
see.
said that. Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. But you said that. Yes.
Oh, Roland, listen, we're happy to go and shill the heck out of what you write. Because here's the thing, folks. What's Your Baseline was originally a project of Roland's. I'm sort of trying to keep his knowledge in a centralized space that he could share with people and get asynchronous access to. That's something we both really embrace, which is this idea that knowledge that we've created can live a life outside of the body that we carry. We don't have to meet with you for you to get
Mhm.
an understanding of what we've learned. And that's kind of the nature of human knowledge. It's meant to be cumulative. And this is a really good example of cumulative knowledge because Roland, we're going to talk today a lot about the second book. And I after reading it over and after sort of knowing what you wrote and reading the first book, it really does feel like an evolution. And so today we're going to talk a lot about sort of what that means and why that's important for people. But I have some questions to get us starting off with. So the
Yeah,
first question for
that's
today.
a real reason why we have that episode today, because we did a similar one, I don't know, maybe half a year
Year
ago.
ago?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, whatever, you know. And you tried to play the investigative journalist, and I think you need to step up your game, JM.
Tried to play.
Yeah, you gave me the softball questions. I have
I
high
caught you in
expectations
all
for
sorts of
today's
lies.
recording.
Oh my God, it was a terrible scandal. What you don't know, folks, behind the scenes is I had to cut all that stuff. We had to re-record the episode with all the easy questions for
Yeah,
Roland.
that's when I praised you, you know.
I'm kidding. So Roland, let's get kicked off. First question here, and I've sort of given away the goose a little bit, but what's happening? Why did you go and write another book?
So first of all, and I need to hold it in the camera because this is obviously the the right moment to do so. So the book is called Successful Process Mining Projects, right? And um, I actually, and UJM know that I actually wrote it in parallel with the first one because no mere mortal can publish two books in 6 months. You know, that's just not physically possible if you have a side job and whatever family and all those type of things. So that happened, all that stuff happened in parallel. But the idea was to say, okay, in the first book, which is obviously very, very niche, successful architecture implementation, you know, how many people will be tasked with that stuff? In that book, I introduced the concept of the process and solution lifecycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you have your repository, your enterprise baseline, your solution architecture, your implementation, your execution, and then you have that magic measurement and analysis phase, right? And as you know, the hot stuff in our industry for quite some time now is process mining, task mining, you know, all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, I should write something about it because what I've seen is um, And please, dear listeners, tell me if I'm wrong. What I've seen is that a lot of large organizations dabbled with that technology. They opened the wallet and it was IT driven and whatever, right? And um, not so many small and medium sized companies, right?
Hmm.
So maybe the first Fortune couple of hundreds, who have done that in a niche somewhere, but it's not widespread. And as you might recall, when we had James on the show in episode 20, where he said, "Oh yeah, process mining is the speedometer for your
Yeah.
business." I truly believe that, and I wouldn't buy a car that didn't have a speedometer, right? So I saw the need to spread the word a little bit.
Hmm.
But what I also noticed is people don't know where to start. Right,
Yeah.
so they need some guidance. They need, I don't want to say cookbook. That's a little bit too much, but they need a little bit of advice how to get started because for the average BA, it can be overwhelming,
Yeah.
right? Because you shift from that traditional. I talk with people. I have my butcher paper and my stickies and my stopwatch and whatnot. What we've done for decades. You know, it switches to a data-driven approach. And I've been on a conference last year where I saw tables full of books like data analysis with Python and whatnot. So there was obviously a need for that. And I thought there must be a better way. Right. And by
Yeah.
coincidence, I worked for two software vendors, as and I worked in process mining and in process mining projects. The first time I actually got exposed to it was like 2004, 2005, and I always found it interesting. And I thought, hey, why not write the cookbook that helped people to get off and do their first project?
Yeah. Well, when you talk about successful architecture implementations, you think about like a larger context, large enterprise organizations. When you hone in on a technology like process mining projects, I think you make a really good point that this opens you up to a different class of organization, one that
Mhm.
maybe not looking at sort of enterprise level moves, but people who are able at a small to medium sized enterprise exploit new technology to play in a larger space or play it in the same way the big boys play, if you will, and get some of the same benefits. But you mentioned that there's a barrier to entry. Give me a little bit of a sort of overview of where you see people saying no to process mining and
Yeah.
what sort of reason that your book addresses that they would be saying no without the proper consideration.
Yeah. So first of all, I'd like to comment on what you just said, because I think if you do an architecture implementation, that's perceived as risky, right?
Hmm.
While when you go and say, hey, there's a new technology, can we try it out? It's perceived less risk, right? Yeah,
Just buy
money might
something, right?
also be a thing. So
Yeah.
I think it's less commitment, right? Because you
Hmm.
always can say, well, we tried it and it didn't work. And now you have to help me again because I forgot your question. Sorry.
So the question is like, why aren't people starting? Like, what's for a
Oh,
small and medium sized enterprise? Why isn't process mining on the tip of everyone's tongue? Or if they say it, why is it hard for them to realize any benefits or even sometimes just get their foot in the door using that technology effectively?
I
And your
think
book
it's
addresses some of the challenges. So tell me a
yeah,
little
I
bit
think
more
it's
about that.
yeah, I think it's not just for small and medium-sized enterprises because even the big ones are for made out of people, right? And that content, that topic, is new to everyone at some point in time, right? So what you see is the stuff that you get from vendors, right? Oh, click here. Oh, this thing automatically will save you a gazillion dollars, whatever the pitch is that they have, right? So they're pitching their wares, which is perfectly fine, right? But it's not necessarily um, helping. And I
Hmm.
mean that in the way that you don't explain the concepts behind it. You don't put it in perspective, you know? So to give you an example, the book is called Successful Process Mining Projects. But to be quite honest, and I elaborate in the book, you need more than a process mining tool. You
Yeah.
need a data modeling tool. You need the mining tool. you need a process modeling tool where you can do some traditional analysis. You need a simulation tool because you want to have that 360-degree perspective on a process, and you need more than just process mining. Even though, and that's maybe the other hurdle that you can see is even though it's very powerful because it's data driven, right? And you literally see it. And the one thing that I love in process mining projects is when you show the discovered process to your client for the first time, because it's
Yeah.
either that, oh, experience, like aha moment, or it's a, oh, that no, that's not us moment, but it's always an emotional moment. And that's what I
Hmm.
really love, and then it's your job as the process mining guy to make sure that you can show them that your data is correct and that actually what they see on the screen is the reality that's happening in their organizations.
So where do you see the book, the lessons from this book fitting into the cycle of awareness, cycle of use for someone who's investigating process mining? Is this something that you would recommend for people to read before this technology is considered to sort of get themselves on the right page as an awareness thing, as they're considering platforms and the practices around
Mhm.
process mining, sort of as an enhancement to what they're doing before they implement it, or during and after an implementation? Well, where do you think it makes sense and why?
I think it's both. So at any point in there, I hope I bring a neutral perspective
Hmm.
to that conversation. I obviously use, because in the book, and I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about it, I'm following a
Oh, we
little
will.
fictitious medical device company who wants, and I made it completely up, who wants to try out process mining, so the newbie scenario. And of course, I'm using a tool in there because I need to show something. But to be quite honest, it really doesn't matter. They're all comparable to various degrees. So you don't hear from me, oh, buy tool A or buy tool B, because A, I don't get paid for this. If any of the vendors, just saying, just bring me on. Um, but no, in all seriousness, they're comparable feature-wise. And I think what helps is if you take a step back and you bring a little bit of perspective in it that's grounded in experience, right? So I do have a graphic in there with the 10 do's and don'ts,
Mhm.
right, that you do. And one of the don'ts is see it as a technology exercise, right? Um, the last do is get help from somebody who has done it, right? Because it might be a little bit too steep of a hill to climb if you try to figure it out by yourself. And greetings to Katrin Wenzel, who currently tries to do that, and I have a front row seat in her activities in doing that because she was one of the beta readers of the book. And um, I think it just helps, and I want to give that little lift, if you will, to get somebody off the ground without the tinted perspective of a vendor, because they will tell you a lot to make the sale. I have nothing to gain from it. Again, if one of the vendors wants to sponsor me, I'm obviously all open.
Well, you bring up a really good point, which I think is not often well explained before you sort of take a consideration, which is that if you're thinking you're going to try and do this on your own without either technology or without assistance from a technology specialist or team,
Mhm.
you're paying for this anyways. Like, you're not actually saving any money because your projects are going to take longer. They have a higher chance of failure, and ultimately, the time you're spending is time for people you're already paying the salaries of, but they could be doing other stuff. So you're
Yeah.
actually just burning human resource time instead of buying knowledge, expertise, and like technology to transform that project into an achievable project and a likely successful project, which I think is successful process mining projects is the perfect term for what you're trying to help people achieve. And those do's and don'ts are great. I wanted to talk because you talked about beta readers. Tell me a little bit more about how the process of making this book has changed from the previous one that you put out there.
Well, I said it. I wrote it in parallel, so it's obviously not significantly differently. I don't know if we spoke about that in the first episode, so maybe I just repeat it.
Or like lessons learned as well, like
My
anything you've
yeah, my
you're a
my
two-time author now, right?
not yet. September 15th, but the process has changed for me, right? And with
Yeah.
process, I don't mean the software in which I write and the publishing and creating accounts on all the marketplaces. That's obviously the same. That was, by the way, a lot easier. Once you're approved as an author, you upload your files, there's some automatic check on it, and the next day it could be available, right? That's super nice. The last time at Google, it took literally weeks, to get the book listed. Um, so that hasn't changed. It was easier from a production perspective because I obviously now had all the templates. You might have noticed that the title looks very similarly to the first book, intentionally, by the way, so that it looks like a little serious, with this second and maybe upcoming books. But what has changed is how I write. So maybe let me elaborate. You mentioned I started What's Your Baseline in earnest in
Yeah.
2021 because I just wanted to get things out of my system. And I started writing articles that are still on the website, by the way. And I was just writing down what I thought about topic X. And then I thought, oh, this is a little bit boring, and I need to have some pictures in there because nobody will read 2,000 words of text, right? So I created then some graphics. What happened over time is I tried to assemble the content in a logical structure, and I said that in the last episode as well. Get the structure, find the gaps, but also within of those verticals, and I did a mind map. What's the takeaway of it? So I had a goal,
Mm.
what to write to, right? That's different than just getting it out of your system. And then what I noticed is, and this is how I wrote the second book as well, is let's start with the graphics. What's the flow that you want to have? What's the topics that you want to talk about, right? And I created those graphics first, and then the writing actually is just busy work because what you actually do is you explain what's on the graphic, and you give your color commentary to it. Best practices, tips and tricks, and all that type of stuff. But you need to get the story right. So the mind map, the takeaways per section, and the graphics. Those are the three things. And that's a process that works for me, right? I don't know, Jam, we will see how it will work for you when you become a world famous author, but at least that's the process that works for me because I'm a visual person.
And so, Roland, did this process get informed by any of the experiences and feedback you received from the first book? Because obviously, I know you're writing in parallel, but as you've been editing through it, you've sold a bunch of your first book, which once
I
again, a
did.
pitch
I
for
broke
that
even.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a hey, listen, every author's dream is to at least break even.
Not a small feat, and I could buy a couple of pizzas from it. So it's all good.
But the question is really like, from the feedback you received from people who bought the book, who read it, who left reviews, how did that change when you're editing the book down, the second book? How you approach that, or what sort of things you chose to include on top of what you'd previously built?
It's a mix. And you know it because I invited you to that group as well. I had for the second book the same three criteria, right? The first one is tell me, Roland, what you wrote is absolutely wrong. You need to fix this, right? So content wise. The second one is more about, hey, Roland, have you thought about talking about this or talking about that? So, for example, in book one, Hanneke made the rightful comment and said, I felt dissatisfied because you didn't give a perspective into the future, right? And I said, damn, she's right. So I wrote 2-3 pages about, at least in early 2025, what my predictions for the foreseeable future are. Let's see how they hold up. And the third criteria was like, Roland, go learn English. It's so horrible. You need to fix this. I try to mitigate the latter with a little AI tool. Shoot out to a tool called languagetool.org. I really appreciate that. Those $5 a month subscription is well spent. What I received as feedback in both cases is all three of those. Right. So all three types of comments. I obviously gave a little prediction without Hanneke pinging me, What I noticed is, and this is a positive, and this is obviously depending on the content, is an overall positive feedback, right? So people obviously could relate more to the situation of a process mining project, and they appreciated that I have, I guess we will talk about that, that 6-step process for successful process mining projects at its core. They also appreciated the structure of the book, because when you look at it, I have 3 major sections, which are, well, not roughly the same. I don't know how you say that, the same size. So the first section is talking about process intelligence, setting the stage. How does it fit into the life cycle that I just described? What is that 6-step process, right? So that was like, I don't know, 12,000 words. And the second segment was about, okay, you convinced me I want this. What does it take? What are things that you have to look at when looking for process mining tools? How do you buy them? Who's involved? How do you implement them? That type of stuff. That was roughly the same size. And then that was about half of the book. And then the rest is basically the same size, same amount of words, but it's aligned to that case study that I made up, right? The data set that I used was actually from a real project. I spent quite an effort to scrub it. Names changed, companies changed, whatever, right? But the actual activities and all that stuff, that was based on a client in a completely different industry, right? But then I invented that little story around a mid-sized 8 billion a year medical device company called Heartbeat, and they have locations here and there and there, and they produce their stuff here and here, and whatever, right?
We'll
And
talk about
and
that in the second section when we go
yeah,
through the content. But yeah, it sounds like you took some feedback that you needed to make it more tangible and more forward looking, and both of those became a pretty core part of how you approached it.
yeah, except that
Uh,
the idea of more tangible, that was mine. So that was before the feedback. Um, but yeah, and I'm actively thinking about writing more. I don't know if that's addictive. Um, but I'm thinking about if I can take that Heartbeat story and maybe apply it to other areas and say, oh, now that Heartbeat has done a successful process mining project, they're also interested in this, you know,
mhm.
and I just continue to spin that story, right?
Well, it
But
sounds like you've given yourself a great platform with which to build. And in our second section, we'll actually examine what you've built in this book and give people
Mhm.
a sort of preview of what they might get if they were to, well, go out and purchase successful process mining projects. We'll leave you for a second to play some music and decompress from this first section and come back with those details and the juicy ins and outs of Roland's new book, Successful Process Mining Projects.
The wind will blow, but it's just changing. It's just changing. The wind will blow, but it's just changing.
And we are back with author, two-time author, I might put, Mr. Roland Volt. Roland, we've been sort of talking about the process and the purpose behind this book, Successful Process Mining Projects, your
Mhm.
second book coming out on September 15th. But before the audience goes out and buys it, let's give them a little preview to wet their whistle. And in particular, I have 4 different questions that I'm going to ask you about content that I particularly liked from the book, but I'd
Mhm.
like you to explain it a little bit more and
Mhm.
give people a taste of what they might expect if they were to buy it. The first thing is one of the sort of the really simple guides that is much more complex underneath, but it's a sort of guide to get you started and get your head around what you're going to need to do, and that's the 6 steps. So your
Mhm.
6 steps to process mining. Tell me a little bit more about what they are, why you chose those 6 steps in the order that they come, and what having those sort of 6 steps defined does to make you more likely to succeed.
Yeah. So um, the 6 steps, they sit in a context. So if you take those 6 steps, I will talk about in a second, right? If you take them, they guide you through the whole process of the project, but it has a couple of assumptions, and I think that's um, not to be understated. So the first one is I highly, highly, highly recommend doing small projects,
Mm,
right? There's some vendors who sell you everything and their pitch is we can connect to everything and you just need to build the automation and then the magic happens. That is not true. Period.
it's not
My
magic.
recommend yeah, my no, there's no magic. My recommendation is do short projects, 4 or 5 weeks, right? Do 12 of them in a year versus one-year project that you might be disappointed. Because what you do is you learn something and you build up momentum. You have something to show to people and they get excited and they say, I want this too. Right. So you create value quickly, you create interest by people, which keeps you busy and employed, you know.
Yeah.
So that's the first one. The
And by the
second
way,
take
Roland, the thing that I like to say a lot to customers when they ask this exact question, how do we
Mhm.
spread our practices? I said the most powerful force in the world is jealousy.
Yeah.
You need
Yeah.
to be successful and you need to be visible. And that is how you get more people to come join you on your journey.
Yeah. Nobody wants to root for the team that ends the last season with 0-17, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but the point is the benefit of that short cycle approach is also you have time to learn. And that's the second point. Everyone is new. You haven't been exposed to it, you know, your customer might not have been exposed to it. So you all learn, right? And you might recall from whatever, making your first pancakes, and they burned, or whatever you did, too much water, not enough flour, whatever you did, right? Um, they didn't taste well, but practice makes perfect, right?
Mhm.
So over time, you're getting better, and you will see the same thing with clients, your stakeholders, that you invite to your party. And for example, the first step in that 6-step process, in lack of a better term, I actually don't love it. I call it develop your process mining strategy. And it's comprised of 2 aspects. The one is literally a strategic thing. Why do I do this? What's my short and midterm plan for this capability and whatnot? So to be able to make the pitch to the people who hold the purse. Um, but then you get the next point is, well, where do we get started? At which process do we choose? Where you then say, well, do we have something documented? Maybe, maybe not. I highly recommend to have at least what I call a napkin level of process. And I literally I wrote it on my tablet and put it as a graphic in the book, and it has that little section in the lower right hand corner. Some finance magic happens here,
Yep.
which might be realistic. But you take this thing and you will evaluate, do I have data for each of those steps? And if not, maybe that's not the right process. And speaking of processes, there's also different, I don't know, grades of processes, if you will. You have the low
Mm.
hanging fruit, right? And you and I spoke about that 2 days ago. The the process to request time off. Everybody does it, high volume, whatnot. What value does it have? Right? Not that high, right? But then on the other side, you have those big hairy beasts, where your company is struggling with for years. I would not recommend to do this. Use this for your first project where you learn, right? So choose something in the middle. Choose something
Yeah.
where you show the value, where and this is where the iterative aspect comes in as well, where you can say, okay, we just do a first iteration on this thing. Nobody stops us to spend another 4 weeks on going deeper, asking for other questions and hypotheses. And that's the learning part. When I talk to clients in that first phase and say, hey, what are your hypotheses why your project is not running, your process is not running well? I get the stare. They don't know, right?
Yeah.
But once you've been through that 6-step process in your first iteration, it makes more sense because you see how those questions will be used on later steps. And the
And Roland,
last thing.
I think is like
Mhm,
about the strategy and making a decision which process to go for. It might
mhm.
seem intimidating for people to try and find the Goldilocks process, the perfect combination of factors, not too hot, not too cold, just right.
Hmm.
But I think we've talked about this many times, and I want to stress this again to our audience. That's probably the highest value time you spend. Because if you choose to go down the wrong path, the whole thing's a bust. But if
Yeah.
you get the right process, the right value, the right stakeholders, the right engagement, you set yourself up for not just a single piece of success, but lasting program success.
Yeah.
That's incredibly
You
valuable.
want to have, and that's a good point. You want to have the good buddies on your side, the people you excite who then are going to be your cheerleaders, right? And say, oh, look what we did here. And we improved our process by X% in time and capacity and whatnot, Um, there's two thoughts that I have in that end. One is when you choose your process, is it a standard process or like whatever, procure to pay, order to cash, hire to fire, report to record, all those things? Or is it something that makes your company unique? Because that is
Yeah.
depending on what your process strategy is, right? So outside of mining, the question is, what do I do with those standard processes? And in general, my recommendation would be standardize them, automate the heck out of it. You
Yeah.
won't make more money because you buy pencils faster, right? But if you have a process, maybe your production process or your research process or whatever, the thing that makes you that special unicorn, well,
Hmm.
that is obviously more important. So that could give you also a hint, and I'm currently talking with a university, and their big thing is obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious. It's obviously to see, well, how do our students go through our program? How many drop out? Um, what are the reasons for the dropouts? Is it within the university? Is it outside the university? Is it what is it? Do we have that
Hmm.
one professor who gets a sadistic fun out of failing people? You don't know, right?
Yeah.
But you can see that with process mining, right? So that has a value, right? Because the students are your customers,
Yes.
right? You want to make them happy.
So
So
you're trying to put this all together into a proposal that somebody can actually take forward. So just to be clear, just walk through the 6 steps that someone's going to get when they read this, and we don't have to go too far into it because honestly, you got to buy
no,
it to
you
hear.
should read the book. You should read the book for that. Yes, I wrote
What are the
250 pages about it.
the 6 steps at a high level, and how did
Okay,
you
on a high
decide on what
level.
those 6 steps are?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we spoke about the first one. It's your process
strategy.
mining strategy, right? And as you might get an impression that I spoke 5 minutes or 10 minutes about that single topic, you can imagine there's similar volume of content for the others. The second
Yes.
one is extracting the data. Right. So the whole stuff around figuring out, do we have the data? Where is it? How is it related? Did we miss process steps? How do we integrate? Yada, yada, yada. Again, I do not recommend, to be very, very clear, I do not recommend to build integrations in your first project. Take a damn export because,
Flat files, baby.
yeah, but well, yeah, because in the first step, you would ask the question, how does a good process look like? Right? Is it the cheapest, the fastest, the most compliant, the highest quality, whatever? You get a profile. I call that the levers of a process. So what
Hmm.
happens if you build all those integrations and you go through all the IT mumbo jumbo and it took you 6 months or 12 months, and then you figure out that your process is actually running as expected? That's a waste of time, right?
Yeah.
You rather know that quickly within 4 weeks and move on. And a year later, you come back because you've already built it. You refresh the data and see, I was still good. And maybe that's
Hmm.
it. So step number 2, extract the data. Step number 3 is where you spend the most time. It's creating your data model, right?
Yeah.
The table that ends up in your process mining tool. Here, and I'm pretty sure I'm very unpopular with some vendors because they all build some stuff in there. This is the big thing that scares away people because the vendors, and I don't know why they haven't learned it from the BI folks who tried the same 15 years ago. They build in their transformations in their tool. And in lack of a better challenge, they call it process query language or SQL-ish or whatever, right? And I don't know how many business analysts know how to write code, right? Or think that way. So what I do in the book is I say, hey, there are visual tools for creating that data model, right? The one that I'm using is called KNIME, Knime. I'm a big fan because you build quote unquote workflows and it shows you from step to step how your damn table changes and if it does what you wanted. And it has a little traffic light when you execute it and it turns red if it doesn't execute and you have an error. So you can debug it, and it's self-documenting because you can put little notes in there and say, oh, I merged those two tables because, right? Love it. You don't see that in SQL code. You don't, right? So it lowers the hurdle. But the outcome is one or more tables that will be fed into the process mining tool. The tip that I would give you is when you do that exercise, and you will do that iteratively over and over again because people have questions and you need to calculate stuff, have a validation session with your stakeholders.
Yeah.
So that when it comes to showing the spaghetti diagram for the first time, and I mentioned earlier that you don't have that experience like, no, that's not our data, right? Let them poke holes in there. Oh, sure. Open your SAP system. Let's see if JM created that PO and that date for 5,000 pencils. Just have a look. Oops,
Yeah.
there it is, So do that so that you take out that, and that's a big showstopper, right? You take out that risk of losing credibility.
Yeah. Well,
The
one of the things that
fourth,
I have as a principle for a lot of these projects is a big principle for me is no surprises.
yeah.
Yes, you can put little moments of insight. You can give people a little treat. You can give them something they didn't know before, but no
hmm
big surprises because big surprises are scary and scaring stakeholders is the quickest way to fall off a cliff in terms of support.
Yeah. Continuing answer your question, the fourth step is creating a reference model, right? So what I do in the book, in the data set, I provide a BPMN diagram of an end-to-end process, and it looks like a straight line, right? And in my little case study, the customer is patting their own back and say, look how automated we are, how awesome that is, and then I import it into the tool and I take the data set and now I create swim lanes with roles and whatnot, and you see, actually, it's not that streamlined, and what I'm talking about in that chapter is actually what you did in the past in the traditional business analysis stuff. Create a model, you review it, you see things. Why is this treated differently than here? Do we have a compliance issue? That type of stuff. And I'm also talking, because I'm a big fan about simulation, what it needs to do this. And the simulation will be used in the last step as well. The fifth step, and to a surprise, that's the actual process analysis in your process mining tool. So everyone who has read
Yes,
like
so step
150
5 is they've
pages
already
now,
they're like
now we come to
final.
the meat of the whole thing,
Oh,
and
you got to do the pre-work. You can't just get in a car and start driving. You got to take lessons. You got
yeah, and
you
build
got
the
to do
car.
maintenance. Like, come
Yes,
on, guys.
yes, yes.
You got to know where you
Bring
want to
people
go.
to this.
Like all these sorts of things.
And by the way, I think all the other stuff that we spoke about, right, are part of the analysis too. Figuring out that you don't have the right process, or you don't have the
Mm,
data,
mm.
or you can't wire it up correctly, or you can't figure out what the process is and translate it from your napkin to a BPMN. That's valuable, right? That's valuable. You learn something. So it's not that you have to wait until step 5 for it. In step 5, then I go through, and we had a whole episode about it. About process mining analysis. And it's the same structure, basically, take the overviews to make it comparable, have a high level analysis, have a detailed level analysis. And then I talk about the different types of analysis that you would do in those 3 phases, if you will, right? And I will put the link to that episode in the show notes if somebody really wants to listen to it. What I did here is also I have a little sidebar chapter, because one of the things that I like with process mining is you build dashboards.
Yeah.
And I see a lack of dashboarding skills, or to be more precise, a lack of data storytelling skills in
Yeah.
a lot of organizations. So I muse for a couple of pages about what to think about when building a dashboard, and how you guide your users, how you make it actionable, and all these things. How up to a point where you format it. And I'm fully aware that some tools just can't do what I recommend. They have pretty colors though. But that might be also for some vendors an idea to say, oh, do we offer more features, in visualizing it? And the reason why I'm such a big fan of dashboards is they're not like a static report. The report is outdated the moment you press save or publish or print or whatever you do. Once it's out, it's outdated, right? A dashboard, if you do it right and you have data connected to it, well, it's always up to date, right? And you literally can see, did we put that change in place in that process in our organization? Did it make an impact?
Yeah.
And you would expect your timeline curve, whatever you're measuring, more capacity should go up, right? Tell me how you do that in a printed report.
Yeah, you can.
You can't.
And
You
well,
can't.
the other thing I like about this a lot when you say data storytelling is there's a huge lie in the industry that I've heard so many times, which is the numbers speak for themselves.
No,
Like, oh my
no.
God, that's literally the opposite. Like
Yeah.
your job is to make those numbers make sense and choose which numbers and how to present those numbers so that your stakeholders get the message. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you might as well just show a bunch of random symbols and let them walk all over them and then leave the room equally unsatisfied.
Yeah. I think I forgot who said it. There's lies, there's damn lies, and then there's statistics. And and I think
Yeah.
there's some truth to it.
So it's a good quote.
But
Ah,
I think there's that's a skill that I think a BA should have, right? So bring it in, make it alive.
so then
And
cap it
then
off with number 6, my friend, and
yeah,
let's
when
go
you
through the whole thing.
when you do the analysis, I also would do another validation session in there.
Mhm.
I would just mirror it back in a readout to your stakeholders and say, hey, these are the initial findings. What you will notice is they will come back. Their hypothesis might be this process sucks because Jim Bob in the escalation organization just doesn't do his work, right? Maybe you find out Jim Bob does his work. There's other reasons, blah, blah. So they might come back and want to drill deeper. What I would recommend is, remember, we do quick iterations, right? Make it a limit to say, okay, yeah, we're going to do one more iteration on that data,
Mhm.
but we have that 4-week time frame. We can't go forever. But there's a big parking lot item, and we're going to do that in a follow-up project, right? It's not forgotten. You, Mr. Client, you will have to choose what's more important for you. That's also a nice thing. So
Yeah,
do
but put a
this.
hard stop on scope creep. Otherwise,
Yes.
you're going to get bogged down without actually showing results. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then while you're doing that, but don't show, is obviously you have some ideas how to mitigate those things that you find, right? The challenge that I see is a lot of vendors, consultants, newbies, call it what it is, they think they're done when they've created the dashboards, right? No, they're not. And I think this is the big quality difference. A good process mining project, you actually look for results. You look for content.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about your beautiful dashboard, even if it has nice colors. It's what is the outcome? I'm a big fan of, unfortunately, I don't know enough about it. I had one course in Lean with the University of Swansea, but I'm a big fan of the Lean guys, because they're looking for the value, they're looking for the waste, and obviously I will babble about that in the book as well. Um, you can apply all that stuff to your process mining projects.
Mhm.
Might not be sexy, but what you want is you want to ask the damn why question. Why? Until you're at the bottom of it and you actually found the root cause of that dysfunctionality. And it might surprise you. Anyways, last step, right? You might have some ideas as part of your analysis. You haven't spilled the beans yet, but obviously you should have a list being maintained. And in the book, I give an example. I use a Notion page where I noted down in one column my findings in that little case study, and on the other column, my idea of what we could improve. The last step is your process improvements. And I recommend having a list like this, your big pile of ideas, and then go and prioritize it. And for that, there's a couple of things. Obviously, what is the impact that your idea might have? Is it small, medium, large? But maybe more importantly, also, I recommend a two-step approach to each of the opportunities that you think have a high impact. The first one is doing a sniff test. And that is when you remember a few minutes ago, we spoke about how does your good process look like? Capacity, time, cost, experience, quality, compliance, whatever, right? And you should have a limited number of those things. Well, take the sniff test of your idea. If your idea is to hire more people, what's the outcome? Well, your cost will go up. People wanna get paid. Your compliance might go down because us humans, we like to make mistakes. So you have to put some effort in there to mitigate this. Your capacity might go up, which might be great. Your times might go down, which also might be. So you have your levers of your process. And the way how I did it in the graphic is in the upper right-hand corner, you see little arrows pointing up, sideways, or down. And that gives you the first idea. Is that a good idea? And there's one example in there where I say, it's great. We have more capacity. We're faster, lower cost. The rest stays the same. Good idea, right? And then you take that updated ranking and then you do your calculations, right? What's the ROI? What does it cost? What are the implementation costs? The full picture of it, and that might then give the final score for your recommendation. Because what you want is at the end of this stage, you want to have two things. You want to have your stakeholders make a decision. They should agree with you. JM, that's a great idea. Let's put it on the list. And you want to close it out with a roadmap, with an implementation roadmap, so that you make a suggestion and say, okay, hey, I think in the next 6 to 9 months, these are the org units that are involved, and I want to have risk do this and HR do this and whatever. These and those guys do that, right? IT does this. So
Yeah,
this
actually
is,
make a change that has a meaningful effect rather
yes,
than
yes,
simply
but
throwing up all the problems and saying, good luck.
it stops. And it's not because I want to write a book about this. It stops at the point before you go into solutioning, right? It's just the box with a word and a time frame. Oh, you must retrain all of our purchasing agents in this policy in the next 4 weeks. You don't say how that works. You don't say who it is and whatnot. Obviously, you should have spoken to the guys to have an idea if your 4 weeks are enough time for it, if that's reasonable. But it's not, or change the system, automate that, right? It's not the solution architecture. That's way too big of a topic. And when you think about our life cycle, that's a different phase, right? So I think that's a good cut. But at least you have a plan. And I've seen them in those sunburst slides, or I've seen that as Gantt charts, a visualization of how you intend to implement it, because that's important for your stakeholder who gives you the final thumbs up or thumbs down.
Yeah, so Roland, I've heard the 6 steps you've gone through here, and I think that you made a bunch of really good, a bunch of really good points as you sort of looked through it. One I wanted to comment on here is the idea of figuring out what matters to your stakeholders. Something
Mm,
we deal with a lot is the idea of currency. When you think about return on investment, the word
mhm,
return has a sort of hidden characteristic of utility.
mhm,
So, what types of currency can you pay somebody? It's not just in American dollars. There's lots of other things. Ultimately, some things can turn into that, but like it could be customer experience, it could be
mhm.
constituent services in the case of a government organization, it could be risk mitigations and controls, reputational protection. There's different sorts of things you can offer, and the relative utility affects your return metric. And so checking that in before you send something out the door saying we need to change this is a really important part of
I
that.
agree.
I love it.
Yeah, I agree, but the mighty dollar rules all. So if you can't
Yeah,
make the numbers work, your idea will fail,
fair, fair.
So yeah, there's the it's like in Animal Farm, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Right? So,
Fair and fair, my friend.
and I'm
So
pretty
I
sure,
want to go to the next piece of the puzzle here because
yeah.
you mentioned a couple times that you use a fictitious company. Tell me a little bit more about Heartbeat as a fictitious organization. Why did you choose to use that as a mechanism of sort of proving your point? And tell me a little bit more about how you approach that in the book when you demonstrate how you might actually apply this lesson in real life.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter in my little fictitious company if it's a global medical device company or if it's a pencil production. So that's not real. That's just the backdrop to make it a little bit more realistic. You set the stage. It's like when you watch CSI Miami, for those of you who are old enough, you see the first shot over the Everglades in golden sunlight and whatnot. You're setting the stage. But what I did in the case study is obviously I put in the questions that Heartbeat has, right?
Hmm.
And there's not only the process, how they think, how awesome they are, and they're integrated with their vendor systems, and it's all super duper automated. But then I do have a slide in there where I say, okay, um, we want to know something about this process, right? So that's the first one. We want to know uh, how we have to change our organizations. Do we have too many people? Too few? Is it too expensive? Whatever. We want to know about the cost, right? Can we improve it? Can we make it more cost effective? We want to know about our degree of automation. Are we as good as we think we are, right?
Hmm.
And then the last thing, which is a little bit outside, is the question: is process mining for us? What do we need to learn? Right. So those are, and I have a graphic with a circle where I have a bunch of slides. When it comes to the process, do we adhere to our SLAs? And I invented some SLAs like utilization of roles and how long it's allowed to take to go from step A to step F, right?
Hmm.
So what I want is for those of you who download the data set is trying to recreate it, because it's a bunch of, I don't know, 20 questions, 30. I forgot how many. I would need to look it up. But it's a bunch of questions. And of course, you need to give an answer to those questions, because what happens if you fork over your hard earned money and somebody makes a promise and even creates not only that graphic with all those questions, but even a table that says, oh, you need to use this tool to answer that type of question, ideally, and they don't give the answer. So what I did in the book is in the second half, so in section 3, I went and said, okay, this chapter covers step 4 or step 5, and then I explained what I did. And then each of those chapters uh, ends with the takeaways for our Heartbeat project, right? Because obviously you should look, and I don't want to spill the beans. There's obviously some things that are don't going well with the process, and
Yeah.
you should find it, and I'm saying, oh, look, this is a finding. That's great. You showed me the what. Well, what's the why behind it, and the who, and the when, and the where, that type of stuff. And what do you
So
do
is
with
this like
that?
a combination of like a reference case study, like the
Hmm.
kind of things one might take, and also a challenge for
Yeah.
the readers of the book
Yeah.
to themselves investigate process problems? Because
But
if you're reading
yeah.
it now, the intention is you use the learning to do exactly this in your organization.
And if you do that exercise and you find something different than I found, which is much better, ping me. I put my email address in the back of the book. Send it to me. Tell me how full of stuff I am. I'm happy to have that conversation. So I don't have. I hope I'm humble enough to say I don't have the intention to be shown as the person who knows everything. Right. I just
Yeah.
took some things from the data set that I saw that are objectively wrong, well, or could work better, and then I took those ideas and then I spun them to an actionable roadmap at the end of the day. So the idea is that in that section 3, which is half of the book, right, you would try to create the same thing. I give you on the same website the solutions. You can download 9 workflows. You can download BPMN files and graphics of the change processes. It even goes, I was using little advertisement. I was using Eris as the mining platform. Just did it for you, JM.
Uh,
Um, and I was using Eris for this, so you even can download the Eris process mining project and an Eris database, so that you literally can restore it in your installation. But to be very, very blunt, you don't need to use it. You can use other tools as well, right? So, and I try to make it as open as possible, right? So because
yeah,
what I want
that's
is I
very
want to
fair.
teach something, right? I want to teach how do I do this? Because that is what I've seen is the gap, right? People are like the rabbit in front of the snake, and they don't know what to do. And I give them an approach. I give them the files. I give them hopefully the moral support. You can do this, JM, to do it
Nice.
because I see the value. I see the value in using this because, like I said before, who would buy a car without a speedometer? I wouldn't, you know?
I think our audience does too. And I think we'll take another brief break to have people consider what they've heard in this section. But when we come back, we're going to let you know all the things you get from this book, not just the writing itself, but the assets alongside and how you can maybe purchase or investigate further as you're considering successful process mining projects.
Hey, happy day, happy day. Won't let you down, won't let you down.
And we are back with the final section and some final thoughts from Mr. Roland Volt, two-time author, with his new book, Successful Process Mining Projects. Now, Roland, we've been teasing this the whole time. People want to know where they get free stuff. You
Mhm.
already have some of the assets you're talking about in the book set up for people to go and take a look at and even download and use. So tell me a little bit more about what they get alongside the piece of like writing that
So,
goes into the details of the case studies.
yeah, so one thing is obviously this thing here. You get a
Sure.
book, it has words and pictures in there and all that type of stuff, right? So the voice overlay, if you will, right? Um, I have 3 freebies that come with the book. So it's similar to what I did with the first book because I think you should have a value add. When you look into the book, you find a code, right? You go to whatsyourbaseline.com on the book page, which is actually currently live. And then on the bottom, you can reclaim your freebies. You type in the code that you see in there, and you get to another page where you can download the stuff. So what you get is 3 things. The first thing is you get all graphics in the book, Creative Commons license, so you can use them for your purposes with 2 conditions. One is you need to quote me and say I'm the author of those slides, right? And the second thing is it's a non-commercial license. So you can use it within your organization for the purpose, but you can't make a product of it, which I think is a fair use, right?
That's fair.
So you get all the slides. It's about 100, give or take, right? So it's quite a lot of colorful pixels that are there. And one of the critiques that I heard from the first book was like, oh yeah, some graphics are hard to read. Well, download the damn thing, zoom up to 400%, and it's still crisp, right? That's the first one. The second freebie that's included is a checklist. And I created this because in the beginning, I explained the 6 steps, but some people just might read the second half, the case study. And the case study is more action oriented, or to say it in other words, there are things that I explain in that first chapter, like bring in your stakeholders and let them poke in your data, that I might or might not mention in the hands-on part in section 3, right? But the checklist itself includes all the things nicely on a few pages, little with checkboxes. Have I done this? Have I done this? So that you don't forget things. Or
It's a
you
recipe for success. Yeah.
yeah, you're actively choosing not to do it, and then you own your success or failure, So anyways, so you get that checklist. And then the third freebie is what I mentioned before. It's the data, it's the solutions, it's the actual client briefing. I even wrote a statement of work, you know, um, a project plan, those things
Mhm.
that you would need for those short-term iterations. If you really don't know where to start, well, take the damn structure from the SOW and pitch that to your boss, and say, hey, I want to do A, B, C, and D, and it takes me 4 to 6 weeks, right? So those are the freebies that come with it.
It's fantastic. Well, that sounds like a lot of value add. I mean, frankly, if I'm presenting process mining within my organization, stealing those slides and using them to try and sell it and spread
Mhm.
it feels like a really good shortcut to
It's an
getting the resources I need to run my project. I
it's
love
an
that.
accelerator. Yeah, that's the whole
Heck yeah.
purpose. It's an accelerator, and it's hand-on. It has tangible value. Um, the
Well, let's say I love what I'm hearing and
uh-huh.
I want to buy the book, but it's not out until September 15th, unless you're listening to this after the 15th, which September 15th, 2025 is a great day to have heard this after because the book's already available. Where do I go to find out more about it? where will I go on that day to buy it? Or if I wanted to pre-order it, how can I
Yeah.
do that?
So the book's already on pre-order. So you
Hey,
can, and unfortunately, it's just the ebook version for whatever reason. And I complain about this in our corresponding episode. Amazon doesn't allow you to do pre-orders on paperbacks, which is just silly, you know? So it will be available on Amazon, on Apple, on Google, and on Barnes & Noble. And maybe more importantly, it will be available on our web shop, which is whatsyourbaseline.gumroad.com, right? And I do have an offer for you. If you, dear listeners, want to buy a book, and I see your purchase, right, and I will see your email address, I will send you an electronic copy of the book today, right? So you can read it a couple of weeks earlier. All the freebies, all that stuff is already created, so you can get started today, right? If you order a paperback, well, then you will have to wait because it will be fulfilled by Amazon, so we will have to wait until the 15th. But you get your ebook a couple of days earlier, right? So, and you would have both, right?
although I
Um,
must say, I strongly recommend people, I reach into my bag here. I strongly recommend people buying the physical book because I don't know, it smells good. I like books. This is your old book. I don't have the new one yet,
Yeah,
Roland. You
yeah,
haven't.
you don't, because
I don't think
there's
anyone has
only
it.
there's only one copy that exists, and it has that stripe not for resale, right? So, but the point is, I also do on that website have two more offers, and one company, um, in Denmark of all places did it because I also offer bulk discounts. Right. So if you buy 5, I give you 10% discount. If you buy 10, I 15. If you buy 15, I give you 20. Right. So that will be a thing, and it's just happens on our website. So you don't get those discounts on all those other places. So, and I
No,
put
if
the
you're like a
link
practice
in
leader, you
there.
have a bunch of people on your
Mhm.
team who are getting started with process mining or already started, but things aren't always working the way you want to. Pick up the books, hand them out, make it required reading, and suddenly maybe your fortunes will change in your ability to execute those projects.
Yeah. And then I have another offer, which I also did for the first book. Uh, all three things are applicable to the other book as well. Is you read the book, you have questions. So I do have an offer where I say, okay, buy a book and get an hour of consultation with me where you can ask your questions for the low price of $100, right?
Pretty
And
good
then I'm
deal.
happy to hop on a call and answer whatever questions you throw at me and have the conversation with you. So I will put the links in the show notes, right? But it's
Mhm.
whatsyourbaseline.gumroad.com. That's the website. You will see it when you go to the website, whatsyourbaseline.com/books. It's also in the menu. You will see a page where you can then choose book 1, book 2, right? And then each book gets its own page from where you see all the links and where you can buy it and where you can download the freebies and all that type of stuff. That already exists. So if you're interested, click on it. Also, if you like what you see, what you hear, if you have questions, don't be shy, reach out to me. I'm available on LinkedIn. Um, my email, Roland at whatsyourbaseline.com. If you have nasty questions, it's jm at whatsyourbaseline.com. So you got filter opportunities here.
Fair and fair. And that's a great pitch for the website and also for just people getting in touch with us. So thank you for joining us for this fantastic episode. Um, it's great to see people who stick around to the end and find out all the great ways to get in touch with us because people do and they do. So we get great comments, great feedback, emails from people who are looking to hear about certain topics on the show or who have some ideas or thoughts on the previous things we've said. Please get in touch. We love responding to these comments, either on LinkedIn or via email. We love responding to people getting in touch with us through the website and the contact form there. Please come on and join our little family and community. And once again, if you'd like to get more information from us, we'll be happy to respond to those and give you more context and in Roland's book, even with that offer, even give you a full session that you can go and inquire more as to how you could make your process mining projects successful. But until we revisit each other again in the digital space or in the physical one, I've been J.M. Merlinson.
And I'm Roland Wold.
and we will see you in the next one.